So having a cup of coffee in my Starbucks mug from Prague.
Ooh,
So I picked
fancy.
this up a couple years ago when I went over to visit a client's development team in the Czech Republic. So it
Nice.
was in a different city, but they had mugs. Prague. It's the Starbucks You Are Here mug series.
Mm.
So they've got them for states, major cities, areas, and whatnot. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna drink out of this morning. It's now afternoon for me while we're recording.
So, two coffee related comments. One, I have an addiction to buying coffee mugs, but it gets me in trouble because apparently it takes up all of the space in the cupboards in the kitchen.
We
Uh,
have the same problem. I,
so,
I I can commiserate.
so some of my mugs are sitting behind me in my office drawers and desks, and so I don't get in trouble for having taken up too much cupboard space. And then this morning, I've been researching security keys because this beast right here makes awesome, amazing coffee. And maybe I mentioned this, but now my 20-year-old son is becoming a connoisseur of the dark nectar. And he just pops into my office randomly throughout the day. Can I get a cup of coffee? Like, this is a 10-minute process for me to get this machine going and make you coffee. And so I pulled out my old Nespresso machine, which I haven't used in a couple years. And of course, after a couple years of non-use and non-maintenance, sustainable analytics, comment here, it's not working.
Mhm.
So I've tried all the hacks on YouTube and none of it works. So I have to, I want to take it apart to see if I can fix it, but you can't take it apart. there's, there's no like, there's like, it's like a special screw that you have to have like the right security kind of key to open it. So
Oh, interesting.
I found one on Amazon for $8 and I ordered it and it'll be here tomorrow. So we'll see if it'll allow me to break into the machine and hopefully I can fix it.
Yeah. Let me know.
So
Let me know what happens there.
yeah, I will let you know. So there you go, kids. If you want something to work, you have to commit to using it and maintaining it.
Yeah.
You can't just pack it away and put it on ice and think it's going to work when you pull it out in a couple years. Chances are it will not work. And we've seen that with some analytics practices, folks saying, we'll just kind of let it run on its own and it will be fine. And when we're ready to reboot it, everything will work just the same. Nope.
The code is set it and forget it, right? We'll just pick up where we left off in 6 months, right?
It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way with coffee machines. It doesn't work that way with your analytics implementation. So, did I show you my pen?
No, you did not show me that.
Do you know what this is?
No.
This
Is
is
it?
the astronaut
No.
pen. It writes upside
Dang.
down.
So have you laid down and tried writing upside down?
No.
Let's see. Okay, so we need results from two things. One, the security key for the
What
Nespresso machine, and then you need to, like, this afternoon, go write some notes laying down and see if it
Yeah.
works.
I'll report back.
Nice.
Yeah. Goes along with my set.
Nice. Yeah, we got that coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah, super
Our fun little
excited
team
about it.
building exercise.
Yeah, we're building Lego together. It's going to be super fun. I posted about it on Twitter and it blew up. Did you see how much
Oh yeah, I
attention
saw
it
that.
got? And then
I
other
got mine
people.
right here.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's bigger than I thought from the photo you posted. It's good size. Yeah, it blew up on Twitter. People were like, "Oh, this is so awesome! Like, I want to do this." And then someone posted, "Can we make this a national holiday or like a bank holiday?"
I saw that. Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm considering titling it our first annual team building exercise.
Yes,
Kind of make
yes.
that like almost like as kids are going back to school, like our fall team building. Because it's been a while since we've all been together. And in fact, we've actually
Yeah,
added to the team since the last time we've been together. So there's several people we haven't
quite a
had
bit.
just like a fun get together with.
The last time we were together and you weren't there, Jen was firing T-shirts into a really fancy chandelier in Vegas. So
And I am going to go get that clip.
it is so great. Every once in a while, I'll just pull that out and watch it just because it makes me smile so
I might
much.
put it on our Instagram story.
Oh yeah, good call. Yeah, good call. That was a good time. Yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
while since we've done anything, so we still need to find some time to get together in person. But this is definitely going to be a fun virtual event that we're all kind of hanging out together.
Yeah, and one of the ideas behind it, because people are like, "Oh, well, you're building Lego together." Like I could kind of hear some chirping in the background. It's a way for all of us to get together, and it's not centered around work.
Yeah,
Like it's not like because I mean, even the times we have gotten together at conferences, it's great to get together. It's still focused around work. This is one way to push work to the side, so we can actually spend time together as people and not just colleagues and coworkers and
yeah.
not to say there isn't value to the in-person ones. I'm not trying to say that. Um,
Well, it's
or
the it's
the ones
the
around conferences.
it's the agenda in that it's okay simply to do something fun, and back in the office days we had this notion of doing, team activities, but it always had to have some kind of like slant to it, so probably we could get, budget for it, that it had to be, related to work, like how is this bonding us as a team, like what lessons are we learning that we can take back and become a stronger project team, like can we just do something for fun and not have it be tied back to work? you know,
Yeah,
it just should be okay for us to do that. So,
exactly.
yeah.
Um,
So that's what we're
and
doing.
yeah, and it's going to be a bit of a stretch to tie that to our concept to or our topic for today. Um, but like, yeah, I'm just gonna. I'm not even going to try to segue it. I'm just going to jump right in. To start to pivot to our actual topic, um I want to talk about the value of digital analytics today. um their value is a relative concept, and that was one of the things that
Mhm.
kept coming back to me as I was thinking through this episode, because there's the cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. What is one man's trash is another man's treasure. Value is relative to the person. um and yeah, so like I want to talk about the value of digital analytics, because if you think about it, when it comes to digital analytics, those that are in and close to it within an organization, so that analytics team, they see it as valuable. Those working with the data day to day see the value, and I'm going to beat that word into the ground today. They see the
Mhm.
value in it, but those on the outside often do not. They'll brush it aside and say that that's great and all, but this is what I think we need to do. That's one example. And that's one of the reasons why it is often a tough go trying to sell analytics to management several levels above to where that analytics team sits. Um, and we talked about it again last week, at the start of the COVID pandemic, because for one reason or another, organizations didn't see value in digital analytics. Those teams were the first rounds of layoffs and furloughs.
Mhm.
Like that line that you said when we started things off with, talking about maintenance and just putting their analytics and marketing programs, on autopilot. That's exactly what we heard
Yeah.
from people is, we're going to put it on autopilot. We'll pick back up after this passes. Um, so I want to start with a basic question. I've
Mhm.
got several to talk about today, but I want to start with a basic one. What is the value of digital analytics? As someone who's close to it, who's someone who's worked in it for, God, what, a decade and a half or more at this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah.
Maybe going on 2 decades soon. Um, what what is the value of it?
So from my perspective, it gives us an opportunity to learn more about our customers, which I don't think many organizations take that approach. If you kind of take a look at the experience over the last 10 to 15 years, most of the times it's about it's almost operational, right? It's about, well, we need these pixels because it informs this marketing campaign, which apparently drives more income and revenue for us. but no one's really talking about what the true value of it is. And for me, it's twofold. One, it's an opportunity to have um, an inside view over the behavior patterns of our customers, which should tell us a lot of information. Back in the early days of quote following customers around, literally that's what they did. I can't remember the name of the book. I think it was a Paco Underhill book where they talk about the fact that in grocery stores and department stores in say the 80s, they would literally have people in the stores with clipboards and paper identifying, oh, Jim just walked into the grocery store. I'm literally going to kind of from a distance follow him around, make note of what aisles he goes down, what products he picks up and puts back, what products he picks up and puts in his cart. And they did that because they knew the value of understanding the wants, needs, desires, frustrations of their customers based on their shopping patterns. And now we have such a more elegant, easy way to do that without having to manually follow someone around with a clipboard. But we've forgotten about that kind of core value of what we were trying to solve for back in the 80s. And that is to understand the behavior patterns of our customers so we can create better experiences for them. So that's number one. And then number two, and something that I've been talking about more recently, is digital analytics has the opportunity to be an incredibly valuable component of your product lifecycle, of your product management team. Uh, and if you think about it, it's quite the opposite of what most of our experiences has been with product, in that analytics is an afterthought, a bolt on. It's, oh, by the way, we launched this new product 2 weeks ago and now the CEO wants some insight in it. Can you wire in some analytics? And what I'm arguing is that the true value of digital analytics is to be not talked about in the beginning. And we've kind of talked about that. Digital analytics needs to be thought about. What are the requirements for digital analytics in the beginning? Yeah, that's a lot greater than having it as an afterthought. But what's even more valuable is having it as an active participant in your product cycle. Meaning that rather than being a bolt on that you use to measure your product, you actually use analytics to help inform your ideation and your product design cycles, so that you're using that as part of the input, along with input from product designers, input from people that are experts in user experience. Just as important as including the input from your existing customers based on how they're using your products today.
I love that you brought up product because it's the one area that is screaming for this information, but it's also the one that I feel like analytics teams don't argue for. They always argue for that first part that you were talking about, as far as understanding the customer journey, how marketing campaigns perform, what's going on the site today. They don't argue for the product side of it.
That's right.
And as you were talking, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, is that the reason then why, when analytics teams are fighting to be at the grown-up table, we use that analogy, that Thanksgiving analogy all the time, of being at the kids table versus being at the adults table, because they ignore the product piece of it, and they're only focusing kind of on the experience side of it, or like the site experience and what's going on in the moment, that they miss out,
Yeah.
because
And
product is at that adult table.
oh, for sure. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a massive opportunity. It is the reason why, well, it's a major contributing factor to why so many analytics teams were first to get cut in, excuse me, the initial rounds of layoffs, reorganizations, whatever you want to call it, at the start of the pandemic. Think about, you bought a new truck.
Yeah.
Think about your truck. Think about a really cool, valuable feature in there that if it stopped working, you can still drive your truck. And that's how we view analytics, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, in some organizations where it's working well, it's like, well, it's really nice and it makes the process a little bit more enjoyable. But if it went away, we can still drive the truck, we can still build the product. But if analytics, where it should be, is a linchpin in your product design process, then you can't really live without it. That's like saying, well, we want to create a new product. Well, we don't have a product designer. Well, that's going to be a problem. And until we're able to shift from a, hey, digital analytics really is about post after the fact measuring how well your product works, to moving it to, Sure, I mean, it can be a measurement device, but, and I've always, that term measurement, pound measure, kind of puts us in a bad spot, right? It's like, oh, we just measure things. We're missing this huge opportunity, untapped, of value creation, where it's not about just measuring, it's about using the inputs from analytics into creating more meaningful products at the start, at the very ideation phase. And if that is true and your analytics truly is an input into your product ideation stage, I guarantee you it's not the first round of layoffs when the next downturn in the economy comes.
And Sadie agrees.
She agrees. She always agrees.
Let's continue, down that road. Like, once that value is defined, how can you convey it to those that aren't close to it? Because again, I completely agree because I'm close to this. There's a bias, in my perspective here, and I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible to try to navigate this particular conversation. But in your role now, in your stage of your career, where you're at running a consulting firm, how do you convey this value of what your company can do for analytics to buyers of enterprise level organizations?
Well, I mean, it's like anything else that we do that we naturally include data and analysis for. Yet, for some reason, in our businesses, specifically where digital data can play an important role, we don't. We look at it again as an after fact. It's like, yeah, it will report on how well it works. So think about, outside of business, think about just any major purchase that you've made, buying a house. People that buy houses have real estate agents that use analysis and data to understand market conditions and trends, to understand if the pricing is right, look at comparables, do analysis of in order to get the right price for their buyer or seller. They're using analytics as a core part of that decision making process. They don't use it as a, okay, let's go, buy this house, and then after the fact, let's use the data to see if we overpaid or not, or to see
Mhm.
how happened. Like, we don't do that. We use it as a critical part of the buying process. But for some reason, we've got this mental blocker in business that, and even in every other part of the business, think about, campaigns that you launch or acquisitions or any other thing you do, you use data and analysis as a core part of that decision making process. Yet when it comes to product, for some reason we shun it because maybe it's too scientific and product is more of an art, and we have designers and UX people, and they have their experience and their creativity, and that's what creates products. And we've kind of shunned the fact that data should be an input into that, as in any other decision making process that we make in the business. And again, I think it's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity from the product teams, to not look at data as a critical input, that it's more than just a creativity practice, that there's a scientific element to product. Um, but also from the analytics perspective, we need to be less responders and more strategic in how we position our services within the business, because far too many analytics organizations just kind of sit there and say, well, we're on call, and once someone says they want something, we'll provide them something. We need to be a little bit more proactive and start beating on the door of the product managers and saying, wait a minute, why aren't you including product data as a critical component to your design process? So I think there's definitely blame to go around on both sides, and ultimately, what I think this comes down to is lack of executive vision.
Mhm.
In that, these teams can fight it out, but if we don't have an executive in the room that can come in and say, data is a critical piece of our product design process, it's going to be difficult to get any kind of a foothold.
Why do teams fall into that first responder mode?
Well, I think it's natural. I think, especially for those of us that work in digital analytics, it's kind of a natural for us to want to be problem solvers. And so I think just our personality types of wanting to solve problems, and solve riddles, it just is naturally where we are drawn, which has pros and cons. In this conversation, it's kind of a con that we get drawn, to that. I also think part of it is, it takes more effort. And not that being a responder is easy and doesn't take a lot of effort, but I don't really have to think about how I'm going to structure that conversation and that part of the business and how we do things more proactively. It takes a lot of deliberate action to be able to be more forward thinking. And unless you're committed to that, it's not just going to happen organically, right? Whereas if Jim is screaming at me because he has a problem and he wants to know why 50% of the people are following out on step 3 of the funnel. Oh, okay, yeah, we can, all of us are going to get giddy and excited about trying to solve that. But being proactive, thinking about how we can, think ahead and figure out where do we need to position our services, that's really hard and takes a lot of mental energy to figure out. And again, unless we're deliberate and we're driven to try to do that, it's never just going to happen organically.
And it's definitely something I know I've had to work at, because there is that adrenaline rush of coming in and solving a problem or building something new that someone brings to you.
Hmm.
It's definitely um, taken like a bit of training, if you want to think about it, for any, to anything else that you want to do in life. It takes some practice and training to 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 build that muscle of being proactive, of making sure that you're talking to the right teams and seeing what are they hearing from the rest of the organization, so you can contribute early. Because yeah, like that is a common problem, going back to what we were saying earlier about product teams. We launched this new product, where the product is launching next week. What data can you get from it for me, so I can know how it's performing?
Yeah, and again, it takes a lot of dedication to push that conversation upstream. And I would say the bulk of, at least the companies, the type of companies that we work with, and we've obviously helped change that culture with our clients, but the type of companies we're in the same pool with, the vast majority of them are still in this reactionary state, where a product launches or a product is about to launch, and then all of a sudden we have a bunch of requirements of we'd really like to know, A, B, and C. The first thing to do is obviously put in the effort. And again, it's going to be incredibly difficult to change culture, but it really has to be done if you want to be seen as indispensable in your organization. You have to move that conversation as an afterthought to at least the beginning of the product development cycle, wherein you're working collaboratively with the product and development teams to think ahead of the things that we want to measure about the product and build that in as part of the product development cycle. That should be the absolute first step, but we shouldn't be content in stopping there. Again, it will take a lot of deliberate effort and pushing, and honestly some courage, because it's going to be difficult for you to come in and kind of push your way even further to the headwaters within the product pods and say, analytics needs to have a voice in your product ideation cycles, because I guarantee you're going to get laughed at, you're going to get pushed out of the room. They're going to say, what the hell are you talking about? This is for creatives, go do your math stuff somewhere else, geeks. But ultimately, I think the companies that are building incredibly meaningful products that really resonate with their customers are including data as part of the design process, because data is part of that process. It isn't just some nerdy calculations that happen after the fact to measure the performance of your product. It really needs to be an input into your design
Mhm.
process.
Yeah, and you're going to get those headwinds, as you mentioned early on. But if you persevere and continue to work with them, you're eventually going to find those couple product managers where all of a sudden it's going to resonate with them,
Hmm.
where they're going to see the value, and then they will be your best friends. I've seen it time and time again. It takes some work, it takes some cajoling, but once you give them a little bit of insight into what they could do with it, they're going to want you on board for everything.
That's
They're
right.
going to make sure that whatever they're involved in, there is a section for you, that you're going to be brought in early, that you're going to be brought in to advise, not just respond.
That's
And
right. And
it's getting, and that the key is getting past the initial pushback. Once you get past that, it really starts to flow.
it does. And I think the way to get past that initial pushback is to speak their language. And I think this is a challenge that we have across the board in business, is that we think that everyone else should speak our language instead of us speaking the language of the rest of the business. And it gets us in a lot of trouble, and it gets us disinvited from things. And it makes this kind of initial hump or hurdle to get over with product teams incredibly difficult. And by that, I mean, we also need to put in the work and investment to understand product. It's we can't just show up and say, here's the data. We have to do the investment to learn about what it means to be a product manager, what it means to do product ideation, just the same as it makes this sense for us to do the same effort to understand business. How does business work? What are we selling? What does our products do? We can't just show up with the data and expect to be listened to without being able to translate it and talk about it in the language of the thing that we're supporting. And so if we're showing up to these product design meetings and saying we need to be a part of this, and then the next thing we do is say, look how cool we are with these calculations that we can do and these cool statistical models and blah blah, we're going to be disinvited really, really quick. We're going to
Mhm.
be kicked out the door really, really quick. However, if we use our knowledge of all those things and then say, based on that, here's our valuable input from a design creative perspective, backed by what we learned from what our customers are telling us through their behavior, then there's a much better chance and likelihood that we'll be included. But we have to speak their language, and we have to draw the outputs of the data and put it into a meaningful conversation, and not just us showing up as the nerds with the numbers, because it isn't going to work.
Yeah, we've touched on that concept a couple times over recent episodes of knowing how to sell this internally. Um, what the right approach and understanding your audience, and yeah, like coming in and saying, I expect you to understand what I'm saying, is going to get you nowhere. And that
Mhm.
will get you booted back to the kids' table.
Yeah, and I think the most visual, I've shared it multiple times on the podcast, but it's worth resharing again. My most memorable experience of this happening was when I was working client side for an online dating company. And I was working with our data scientists on some forecasting and modeling that we were doing. And as an analyst, I was super geeked about it. I'm like, this is so awesome. And in my once a month sit down with the executive team, I brought members of the data science team with me to present on what we were working on. And I thought it was the most amazing meeting ever. And then as we're walking out, the CEO pulls me aside. Jason, never invite them again. That was a mistake. Super, super smart people. We have them cranking out these models and things for a reason, but there's also a reason we don't invite them to these executive readouts. And that was what happened today. Like, we have no idea what the hell they were saying.
Yeah.
And they have no desire to learn our language. So that's why we have you. So if you want to include their voice, you need to take what they're doing and you need to come talk to us in our language and something that we can understand. It will get us a long way. And
Yeah.
it's going to be hard, and maybe we have to kind of put our ego aside a little bit. And it's really important that what I'm saying here, or what I'm not saying here, is we have to dumb down our message for an audience. I am not saying that at all. These are incredibly smart, intelligent people we're working with in the business, but they simply speak another language. It would be like saying, well, I can't communicate with Jim because he speaks another language, therefore he's not as smart as me. That makes no sense, right? Like, it's literally, we have to find some common ground and be open to the fact that the rest of the business speaks a language that right now, for the most part in analytics, we're not speaking. And that, probably more than anything else, is the largest contributing factor to why we aren't invited to these meetings, why we aren't at the adult table. It's not that they don't really want us there. It's that they probably very much want us there, but it's incredibly awkward and frustrating to invite us and have us off in the corner speaking a different language than everyone else in the organization is
Yeah.
speaking.
And not just speaking a different language, but getting way too weedsy.
Yeah.
That is also a characteristic of people who work in this space, whether it's on the implementation side of things or the analysis and insight side of things. People get very, very weedsy. And one of the things I've noticed working with senior management, again, it's not dumbing it down. Like I want to be very clear to also reinforce what you said. We are not talking about dumbing it down. We are not talking about making it simpler than it is. It's being careful when you introduce details, because senior executives, the minute that you get into details that they don't understand, the behavior I've seen is if I don't understand this, I see risk, and I am not going to okay anything that I don't understand the risk about.
That's right. And it's the importance of understanding your customer and what they are trying to solve for, and knowing the right level of detail and conversation to give them that's going to help solve that, versus make the conversation more difficult. And speaking of, as we started this out, the astronaut pen and the Lego set, talking about Seinfeld, there's an episode where Jerry hires a contractor to redo the cabinets in his kitchen. I think his name is Connie. And if you remember the episode, he's asking Jerry all these questions, almost in a way to show off his knowledge of cabinetry, carpenter cabinetry. He's talking about all the different kind of like hinges that he can put on the cabinets, and he's asking Jerry like all these technical specifications around the hinges, and Jerry's like, I don't know, I just want it to look good and open like this. Like, you figure out like what the specifications are. Like, that's, you're an expert on that. I'm
Yeah.
not. And it was incredibly frustrating to Jerry because he's asking him all these things that are in a language he doesn't speak, nor a language he doesn't want to speak it. He just knows that he wants the cupboards to look good and open in a certain way. And we kind of fall into that same trap, that when we do have the opportunity to present to stakeholders, we get caught up in wanting to impress them with our knowledge. So we're talking about all these different hinges and how they work, and the physics behind them, and the executives that we're talking to is like, wait a minute, we just want to know how to open the cupboard door, and that it's going to look good, and it's not going to conflict with other cupboards that we have in the kitchen. But we can't, it's oftentimes very difficult for us to get unstuck, even with them telling us, look, I don't know, figure it out. But listen to us talk about all the stuff we know. We're so excited to do that, and it's not really doing us any favors.
Exactly. It's almost this thing is, if you have to get into the details, you're either looking for me to approve it or understand it. And if I can't do either, then there's a problem.
Yeah,
It coming back to it, it's again, it's not dumbing it down, it's streamlining the conversation. What
it's
information?
communicating
Yeah.
clearly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's making sure that what you're saying is valuable and you're cutting out the extra.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we've felt so suppressed in the organizations for so long, almost like the Milton of the organizations, that we've kind of been locked in the basement, and it's just like the nerds are down there doing their work. That anytime we get an opportunity to come out of the basement, it's almost like we don't know how to handle ourselves in a social situation. We're like
Yep.
socially awkward, and we're like, look what I can do. Think, was that from Saturday Night Live? Look what I can do. Look at all this cool stuff I can do. And they're like, okay, time for you guys to go back downstairs again.
Yeah.
And it's understandable because we haven't had the light of being up on the higher floors in the organization. And when we get up there, we kind of panic and just get geeky and excited, and we're a bit out of control. And that reinforces this belief of why we're positioned where we are down in the basement. And so I think a real challenge for us is to put in the work to figure out how to be a little bit more socially graceful when we have those opportunities to meet with executives, because if we're reinforcing the beliefs that we need to be down in the basement kind of doing math, that's where we're going to be. If we get the chance to come out and all of a sudden we're acting in a completely different manner than expected, they're going to start saying, well, wait a minute, why do we have these guys locked in the basement? They should be up here on the executive floor helping us think about strategy and design and kind of forward thinking plans. And so, you know, I've put a lot of the blame on lack of executive support and other teams not involving analytics, and they really should. But we can blame all day long, but there's never going to be any end to that blame. Where our energy should be put is figuring out how to be a bit, again, more socially graceful, and provide an experience that is different than what we've been painted with, and really start acting like we belong in these executive social circles, rather than, again, panicking when we get in there and acting like the over caffeinated kid that wants to show off all the cool things that they can do.
Yeah. So as we begin to wrap up, I want to ask the question that we've started including in all of our episodes as a way to tie a lot of this together, tie a lot of these conversations together. Everything that we've talked about today, what does it all mean in the context of sustainable analytics?
Well, I think we talked about at the beginning of these teams getting cut, being transient. There's no way that you can build something meaningful over time, something that's sustainable, if there's no sustainability within your team. And so, really, that's where it ties to that. If you're going to make analytics a long term value add to your organization, you need to have sustainability within your analytics team itself. And if you're seeing lots of turnover and it's a very transient role, there's no way that that is going to happen. You need people that are going to be in their long term, be future and forward thinking. And the only way to do that is to really start to build some stability into the role. And it's kind of a two-way street. And in one, the way to do that is to value the role. And I think a lot of people are moving from these roles because they don't feel valued. And really the way to do that is the kind of the core of this conversation that we've had today, is that we need to move the analytics team out of the basement into the boardroom. Once we do that, we start to get longer term investments in our analytics program, which, if we have everything else in place, starts to create the environment where we're creating more sustainable analytics that are built for the long term.
I think that was really well said. I don't have anything to add to it, so I don't want to take away from it. So I think that gives us a good place to wrap up this week. Um, a lot to think about. Again,
Yeah.
it's making sure that you're not. I think to sum it up too, to add one more thing from my side, as we're wrapping up, everything that we've talked about today, it was about value.
Hmm.
And it's making sure that what you're providing is seen as valuable to the organization, not just volume, that you're checking off that you did certain tasks.
Couldn't agree more. And making that mental shift,
Mhm.
again, is going to continue to push us up higher in the organization. It has to be about the value we're creating. It can't just be about the appearance of work.
Agreed. So let's go ahead and wrap up there for this week. And we'll talk to everybody later.
So, yep.
See ya.